record. Okay, there we go. So we are officially recording. Have a couple more people filtering in, but in the meantime, let me introduce Dr. Fuentes, who will be leading this discussion today, this presentation. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Dr. Fuentes. Dr. Milton A. Fuentes received his master's in psychology with a Latinx psychology focus from Montclair State University and his PsyD in clinical psychology from the Graduate School of Applied and Professional Psychology at Rutgers University. He completed a pre-doctoral fellowship in clinical and community psychology at Yale University and secured postdoctoral training in epidemiology, I might have said that wrong, at Columbia University. He is the 2012 president of the National Latinx Psychological Association and a former member of the American Psychological Association's Committee on Ethnic Minority Affairs. Dr. Fuentes is an ethnic minority delegate of APA's Council of Representatives and a member of APA's Board of the Advancement of Psychology in the Public Interest. Dr. Fuentes' research and clinical interests are in the areas of Latinx, multicultural and family psychology, program development, pedagogy, and motivational enhancement. He serves as a consultant to several organizations, including the former Violence Prevention Office of the American Psychological Association, as well as numerous institutions of higher education, community-based agencies, and corporate clients. After completing an extensive and competitive application process, he secured membership in the Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers. Dr. Fuentes is currently a professor in the psychology department at Montclair State University, as well as a licensed psychologist in New Jersey and New York. And he's also the advisor of our very own club, Multicultural Psychology Scholars. So welcome, Dr. Fuentes. I will hand it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. Melanie, just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Awesome, thank you. All right, well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining me, coming to you live here in northern New Jersey on this wet and rainy day. The title of my talk today is Applying to Grad School, Putting Your Best Multicultural Self Forward. So first of all, I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us today. And I just want to make sure that I address any questions or any concerns you have about applying to grad school. So I'm going to invite you now to just go to the chat box and put any question in there that you want to make sure I answer by the end of today's session. So go ahead and put that in the chat box. Any question you have about applying to grad school, I want to make sure I respond to your questions and your concerns. And I will look for them now. Give you 30 seconds to do that. I recognize some familiar names, so while you're doing that, welcome members of Psych 402. Good to see you in a different space, and good to see MPS e-board members and other psychology majors. Thank you for joining me today. While you're doing that, let me go ahead and move forward to the next slide. I also want to thank the Multicultural Psychology Scholars for inviting me to speak to you today. We finally know MPS as where psychology meets culture. We look at the intersection of psychology and cultural issues in MPS. And I'll talk more about the importance of MPS in a little bit, but just want to thank MPS for inviting me to be a part of today's conversation. Some of you may be familiar with this book called What Color is Your Parachute? It's a well-known book. It's been around for a very long time. I remember when I was in high school, this was a commonly referenced book. And basically, it's a book that helps people understand how to do meaningful work and how to clarify career goals and how to pick a career that's going to fit their interests and their skill set. And so my question to you is, what color is your parachute when it comes to doing mental health work? Many roads lead to licensure in mental health. And if you're taking Psych 402 with me, this is going to sound somewhat familiar. If you're interested in being a licensed mental health professional and delivering psychotherapy or counseling on your own, doing kind of independent private practice, there are several degrees that you can pursue, right? You can pursue a master's in counseling, a master's in marriage and family therapy, a doctorate in psychiatry, a doctorate in psychology, or a master's in social work. I'm going to be sharing some resources with you a little bit later about how to make, how to figure out which of these paths make the most sense for you, which one is the one that you want to follow. Just generally speaking, the one thing that most of these folks can do is psychotherapy, and then they start to move in different directions based on the training and the orientation and the kinds of things that they discuss and address in their programs. Counseling tends to focus much more on wellness and vocational issues. It's a master's degree, as I mentioned earlier. People typically take 2 to 3 years to complete the master's. Then they pursue their licensure by accumulating so many clinical hours and so many hours of supervision. And eventually, once they've completed that licensure process, they can become a licensed professional counselor and work independently out there delivering counseling. Marriage and family therapy and social work also have very similar paths. Typically takes 2 to 3 years to get the degree. All of these degrees are about 60-something credits. Once you've completed the coursework, you apply for licensure, you accumulate your hours, you get the supervision that you need to do that work. And then once you've met all the requirements for licensure that are monitored by the board for these various disciplines, then you are awarded a license to practice that particular type of therapy in the area. Psychiatry, as some of you may know, requires a medical degree. People who pursue psychiatry typically try to treat mental health concerns through medication. They do a lot of work around psychopharmacology. So they treat medical concerns with mental health concerns with medication. So if that's something that appeals to you, a pre-med background would make more sense. And then going to med school and then eventually doing all the relevant rotations to get psychiatric training. And then the psychology degree, it is a doctorate. Typically takes 5 years to get that doctorate. And you can get the doctorate either in clinical psychology, counseling psychology, or school psychology. Those are the 3 fields or areas that lead to a degree that the American Psych Association credits to pursue licensure as health service psychologists, or as we typically know them as practicing psychologists or professional psychologists. Because most of you are psychology majors, I'm going to talk more about pursuing training in psychology, but I will from time to time talk about things you can do if you're interested in pursuing training in all the other areas. So some students ask me, should they pursue a master's in psychology first? And these are the 3 typical reasons why students pursue a master's first. One of the reasons why they pursue a master's first is they're just unaware. They're not aware that they can go right from their bachelor's degree right into a doctoral program. They think they have to get a master's first. And that's not necessarily the case. There are some doctoral programs that require students to have a master's first, but typically if you go into a doctoral program with a bachelor's, you get a master's on your way into getting your doctorate by that program. So they typically award you within the first 2 years a master's, and then you continue your work into toward getting your doctorate. And like I said, some doctoral programs do require students to have a master's first, but some don't. So I just want to clarify that misconception. The other reason why a student pursues a master's first is because they're not sure yet what they want to do. Do they want to be a clinical psychologist? Do they want to be a school psychologist? Do they want to be a more general psychologist or an experimental psychologist? So they're still figuring that out. So they might get a master's first to continue clarifying their career goals. And then the other reason a student might get a master's first is to build on their academic profile. Getting a doctorate in health service psychology, in either clinical counseling or school, is a very competitive process. I'll talk about what programs are looking for in a little bit. And sometimes people don't do all the right things at the undergraduate level, And so getting your master's first gives you a second chance at building your GPA, um, doing research, getting experience, so on and so forth. And so that's why a person might get their master's first, just to build that academic profile. As I noted earlier, the title of this talk is Putting Your Best Multicultural Self Forward. And so I want to give a little bit of attention to issues related to diversity as they relate to the application process. When you apply to doctoral programs, sometimes they'll ask you to submit a diversity statement in addition to all the other application materials, which could be a 2 to 3 page statement where you discuss your own sociocultural profile, your connection to diversity issues, your understanding of diversity issues, and how you might work with diverse populations. And so some programs might take that extra step and require a more comprehensive document, where some programs might just ask a specific question, like, for example, what's your understanding of diversity? How might you work with diverse populations? Or what's been your experience working with diverse populations? But issues related to diversity are pretty prominent right now in the field. And so it does deserve attention. It's getting a lot of attention right now. So I want to make sure that you're ready to be able to respond to any inquiries that graduate programs make around diversity. Some people have actually argued that diversity is the fourth force in psychology after psychodynamic, cognitive behavioral, and person-centered approaches. People are arguing that multicultural psychology or diversity psychology is the fourth force. So how do we go about doing this well? I would advise you to build your cultural consciousness. So what does that mean? What does it mean to build one's cultural consciousness? It's developing awareness of culture in the self, which can result in expanding understandings of culture and developing deeper cultural knowledge about others and context. These colleagues here, Paez and Albert, that's their definition of cultural consciousness. So who are you? What's your sociocultural profile? And once you have a good understanding of yourself, how might that inform the work that you do with other individuals who are diverse as well? So how do you go about building your cultural consciousness? Well, you could take courses at MSU. So for example, Psych of the Black Experience might be a nice course for you to take, for you to understand a little bit more about that particular community and who you are and how you might connect with that particular community. There's a course called Hispanic Latino Psychology. The new term right now being used is Latinx psychology because it's more gender inclusive. So you'll hear me saying those terms interchangeably. But that course will introduce you to the Hispanic Latinx community. What are the strengths of that community? What are the concerns and the challenges and the current issues related to that community? You could also take coursework related to psychology of women, coursework with respect to children, coursework with respect to LGBTQ plus concerns. So that's how we go about building our cultural consciousness. Courses in language, for example, oftentimes touch on culture. A minor in anthropology, and I'll talk about more about minors in a little bit, but a minor in anthropology, which studies culture, would certainly help you build your cultural consciousness. So these are things we can do. Also, engaging in appropriate and relevant extracurricular activities. So stepping out of your comfort zone and doing things that you wouldn't ordinarily do, going to club meetings in clubs that you wouldn't normally participate in. That helps you understand who these folks are, what kinds of things are on their mind, what kinds of concerns they have, what kinds of strengths they have, and it really helps you make important and meaningful connections and build that cultural consciousness. Here I'm going to put in a plug for the multicultural psychology scholars. I will share my bias. I was the original advisor of the club. I helped build the club 10 plus years ago with psychology students. And while I think it's important to be a member of the psychology club, and I think most graduate programs expect you to be a member of the psychology club, they probably would not expect to see you be a member of the multicultural psychology scholars. So when they see that on your resume or your curriculum vitae, your CV, they're going to become interested. They're going to become curious. It might cause them to raise an eyebrow, and wonder what that's about. And you can just let them know that this is a club at Montclair State that looks at the intersection of psychology and diversity and multicultural issues. And that certainly will get an important conversation going. And I think people will become quite impressed if you've got that on your resume or your CV. Again, you should be a member of the Psych Club, but you should also consider expanding your cultural consciousness by being a member of other clubs like the Multicultural Psychology Scholars. You could also read great books on building your cultural consciousness. So a book that was released by Banaji and Greenwald titled The Blind Spot, Hidden Biases of Good People. So what are our implicit biases and how do we best manage them? An implicit bias is a preference for something over something else. But if we've got implicit biases for particular groups over other groups, it might lead to problematic dynamics, problematic efforts with those groups. And so this book helps us understand our implicit biases. Another great book written by a wonderful scholar, Janet Helms, A Race is a Nice Thing to Have, a guide to being a white person or understanding the white persons in your life. Another book by Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And then one of my favorites, Whistling Vivaldi, How Stereotypes Affect Us and What We Can Do. I forgot to add another book, which I really like a lot, by Beverly Tatum, Why Do All the Black Kids Sit Together in the Cafeteria? All these books really help you build your cultural consciousness. This is certainly not an exhaustive list. A lot of other great books out there, but these are some of my faves that I typically recommend. And this is just ways for us to build our cultural consciousness. And by building our cultural consciousness, we can then respond to either the diversity question in the application, or if they ask for a diversity statement, we can do a really amazing job with that diversity statement. If a program does ask for a diversity statement, go ahead and go online and type in writing a diversity statement. There's some great resources out there for how to do that. So as an undergraduate, if you're interested in pursuing a career in clinical psychology or social work or marriage and family therapy or counseling, these are some of the courses that you should definitely take. You should take abnormal psychology. You should take clinical psychology. You should take systems of psychotherapy. Co-op is a credit-bearing internship experience at Montclair State where you earn credit while you gain experience. And you can devote 4 to 9 credits of your 120 credits to co-op. So just go to the MSU website, type in the word co-op. It'll bring you right to that webpage and it'll walk you through the process. Students typically do a co-op in their junior or senior year, but you really want to build that part of your academic profile. That's really important. Those of you who've had contact with me have heard me say this, right? We have 1,600 psychology majors at Montclair State. It's a very popular major, not only at Montclair State, but across the country. Having a major in psychology is a good start, but it's not a great start. You need to do so much more. Take the relevant coursework, do the relevant cooperative education experiences, consider doing lab work with faculty who are clinically oriented. So take a look at which clinical psychology faculty do research and reach out to them and see if they're accepting students in their lab and consider doing some research with that faculty member. Also consider pursuing a minor based on your interest. And I have a slide in a little bit that'll talk about some minors you might want to consider. But remember, you want to give yourself a competitive edge. So just being a psychology major is not enough. Go ahead and put a minor on your transcript. Now, if you're hearing this for the first time and you're a senior and you're about to graduate, it's okay. If you have free electives, go ahead and take courses in that minor without officially declaring that minor. And then when you write your personal statement, you can talk about the coursework that you took related to that area, and you don't have to necessarily officially declare a minor. A minor is not required, but it's a nice thing to have. If you know you want to work with a particular population as a psychotherapist, as a mental professional, then be sure to take the relevant coursework, right? So if you want to work with children, take child psychology. If you want to work with teenagers, take adolescent psychology. If you know you want to work with, from infants to teens, consider taking developmental psychology. If you see yourself working with the Black or African American community, then think about the minor in African American studies. If you see yourself working with the Latinx community, there's a minor in Latin American Latino studies you might want to consider. If you see yourself working with the LGBTQ plus community, then there's a minor for that as well. If you think you want to specialize in working with women, then perhaps a minor in women's studies would make sense as well. So there's lots of minors out there that you should consider. And there's, if you can't pursue the full minor, then take the coursework in these areas. These are some minors that I want you to consider. So if you're thinking about being a social worker, it would make a lot of sense to minor in social work at the undergraduate level. Most minors are 18 credits. If you're thinking about pursuing a doctorate, you're going to do a lot of writing, not only in the courses, but you'll be expected to write a dissertation or oversee a major research project. So go ahead and fine-tune your writing skills by minoring in writing studies. Other great minors I've listed here: a minor in public health, business, especially if you're thinking about doing a private practice. It might be nice to have some coursework in business. If you want to understand the impact of culture on people, a minor in anthropology. If you want to understand how people are in groups, a minor in sociology. If you speak a language already, think about developing that language further. Being bilingual and bicultural will really give you a competitive edge. So think about a language minor. I think all language minors offer coursework around the culture of that language. So you'll get additional culturally based coursework, and you'll continue building your cultural consciousness. I've already talked about some of the diversity-focused minors: African American Studies, Latinx, Latin American Latino Studies, anthropology, LGBTQ plus, so on and so forth. If you're not sure what minors are offered at Montclair State, if you go into your degree audit in NEST and you look at the what if function, there you add the psychology major, and then if you click on the minor option, all the minors at Montclair State are listed there, and you could quickly see, by clicking, you could see what the minor is and what coursework is required. There's also a minor, I'm missing, I forget the actual title of the minor, but I think it's in like sports coaching or something like that. So if you see yourself doing work around performance, enhancing performance, doing sports psychology, something like that, that might be a really interesting minor, a minor in sports coaching that you might want to consider. I want to bring you to a slide that I skipped over here. So this is the typical criteria that graduate programs look for when you're applying to a graduate program. They look at your GPA. So certainly a 3.0 or higher is important for the master's programs. For the doctoral programs, they're typically looking for like a 3.3 or higher. The more competitive programs are looking for a 3.5 or higher. So be sure to work on your GPA. Again, if you're not doing well at the undergraduate level, it's not uncommon for students to start off with a different major, and things didn't go well with that major, and then they came to psychology and found their love late in life, and because they did poorly in the initial major, they've got a poor GPA. That's when doing a master's next might make more sense, because then you can prove to the graduate programs that you are capable of doing graduate level work. The other thing that graduate programs are looking for is the graduate record exam, either the general one or the psychology one. That's going to vary from program to program. And also, some programs right now are waiving that requirement. In a little bit, I'll show you a Twitter feed that is out there on if a program is waiving the GRE requirement, things that you should highlight in your application so that you know what best to showcase. Programs typically want letters of recommendation, 2 to 3 letters of recommendation. So make sure to make some meaningful connections with faculty, and also through co-op, you could also get letters of recommendation from your co-op based supervisors. Now, I want to make a distinction here between native students at Montclair State and transfer students at Montclair State, right? Native students are students that start from the very beginning, first year students, and go all 4 years. You have greater chances of taking a faculty member more than once, being a part of a research lab, being a part of the multicultural psychology scholars, getting to know me and other faculty better. So be sure to make those meaningful connections. For transfer students, because you're only with us for 2 years, you still can take more than one course with a faculty member. I've certainly had transfer students in more than one course. But beyond taking that one course with that faculty member, drop by during their office hours. Let them know what your aspirations are, what your career plans are. Ask for their advice. Get them to get to know you outside of the classroom. So when they go to write that letter, they can say stuff like, you would be a good fit for that program because they know who you are, what you're interested in. Let them know what you're up to. Ask them, if I did need a letter of recommendation from you, what would you need from me? Would you like to see my personal statement? Would you like to see my resume? So be sure to make those meaningful connections very early on. So I'm going to pick on Melanie and Jakai, for example, two students that I know well who are members of MPS. So Melanie's not only a member of an executive board member of the Multicultural Psychology Scholars, so I get to see her almost every week. She's also in my research lab, and so we've done research together. She's presented with me at conferences, and so I can really speak to her strengths, and I can really say when they ask me how well do you know the student, and my options are very well, not well, then I can say I know her very well. Jakai has taken at least 2 classes with me. He's executive board member of the Multicultural Psychology Scholars, and he's in my research lab. So I know Jakai very well also. So these are the kinds of connections you want to make with the faculty and the kinds of activities you want to engage in. You're also going to be expected to write a personal statement, and I'll cover the kinds of things that go into a personal statement, typically 2 to 3 pages, and the kinds of things you should highlight. Curriculum vitae is a Latin term, I believe, for the story of your professional life. It's also known as your professional resume. At the undergraduate level, it's probably 2 to 3 pages, depending on how active you've been. And so you want to start putting together your CV because graduate programs are going to want to see that. You also want to try to get some clinical experience. As I mentioned, consider doing co-op, or if you don't need the credits, consider volunteering. Go to your local hospital, ask about volunteering experiences in clinical settings. They might have a psychiatric unit where you can volunteer. They might have a mental health center, a community-based mental health center where you can volunteer. And also talk to other students who are volunteering in other settings, just so you can find out who's doing what and what kind of experience are you getting. The other thing is to get some research experience. In a little bit, I'm going to talk about the PsyD versus the PhD. If you are thinking about pursuing a PhD in either clinical psychology or counseling psychology or school psychology, they're going to want to see some research experience in your background. They're going to want to see you actively engaged in research, presenting research at conferences. So go to the MSU website, go to the psychology department, check out their research labs, reach out to the faculty. Keep in mind there are 1,600 psychology majors and not 1,600 labs out there. So it's a pretty competitive process. Be sure to put your best foot forward, make a favorable impression. When you reach out to the faculty member, do it in a professional way, send a professional email, create a great impression. Ask them if they're, check out the lab, check out what the lab's about. In your email, let them know that you are interested in the topics they're studying. If you're taking a course in that area, let them know. If you took experimental or statistics with them, remind them, just so they can start to make those important connections. But if you are definitely interested in pursuing a PhD in clinical counseling or school, research is really important. It's less important if you're pursuing a PsyD in clinical counseling or school, but it will work in your favor if you have research experience as well. The other thing you might want to consider is getting some teaching experience. Oftentimes people who pursue PhDs in clinical counseling or school want to be academic psychologists. They want to get jobs at universities, and so teaching experience is important. So if you did well in a class, ask the faculty member if you could volunteer to be a teaching assistant. Right now this semester I've got 3 teaching assistants in my systems of psychotherapy class. These were 3 students who did really well, who I thought would do well with other students. And so they're volunteering as teaching assistants. Now, not only do I know them as students in my class, but I also now know them as teaching assistants. And I can say things about them like, are they reliable? Are they responsible? Do they communicate well? What's their interpersonal skills like? Do they relate well with other people? Those are the kinds of questions they're asking me when I complete uh, the letters of recommendation. So the more contact I have with students, the more likely I can answer these questions. So the more contact you have with faculty, the more likely they'll write a letter for you, and the more likely they can answer these kinds of questions. As I mentioned, a minor is not important, but if you do express in your personal statement that you're interested in working with the LGBTQ plus community, and you have that minor, that reflects well on you. If you say you want to work with the Latinx community and you're minoring in Spanish, for example, or you're minoring in Latin American Latino studies, that reflects well on you. And then, of course, please consider being involved in extracurricular activities. The Psychology Club is an option. Psy-Chi is the National Honor Society of Psychology. So if you meet the GPA requirement, I believe Dr. Collins sends an email out every semester around Psy-Chi. So please look for that and consider applying if you are eligible. That will work in your favor. And then of course the Multicultural Psychology Scholars, or MPS. And don't just be a member. If there's an opportunity for you to be a student leader, please go ahead and pursue that opportunity, because that will also allow faculty advisors to get to know you in a different way. Do you show up to meetings? Are you creative? Are you innovative? How do you connect with other board members? Those are things that we're observing. When you respond to emails, are you reliable with email communication? Are you professional? So on and so forth. So in addition to being a member, think about being a student leader. Let me keep going here. So the typical timeline, right, for applying to grad school. So the summer before your senior year, that means you're a rising senior, that's when you start looking at the application. That's when you start thinking about the application process. You started doing things much early on, right? So when you showed up in your first year as a first year student or as a transfer student, hopefully you started doing all the right things and doing some of the things I already mentioned. But the summer of your rising senior year, you should start to identify the schools that you want to go to. You want to start prepping for your GREs. As I mentioned, some schools are waiving the GREs, and this is a Twitter feed by Dr. Richard Lee on what kinds of things to highlight if they are waiving the GREs. You might want to check out that Twitter feed. I'll happily share this PowerPoint with, well, it's actually being recorded, so it'll be shared with all psychology majors. So you'll look for it there. You want to start drafting your statement and your CV, and the Center for Career Services can help you put together your CV or your professional resume. And the Writing Center can help you prepare your personal statement. Now, in terms of a personal statement, faculty will happily read your personal statement, but we don't have the bandwidth to start from the very beginning with you. So start outlining it, start writing it, get it to the Writing Center, get their feedback, and then once it's in really good shape, bring it to faculty advisors and ask them if they wouldn't mind looking at it and giving you some feedback. So be sure to tap into the resources at Montclair State, the Writing Center and Career Services. And also start thinking about who's going to write your letters and reach out to them early. Reach out to them that perhaps the spring, remember faculty are on break in the summer, so perhaps the spring before that summer kicks in, ask them would they mind writing you a letter and what they would need if they were going to write a letter. Every faculty has different expectations. When a student asks me to write a letter, I typically send them a Word document of everything I need for writing that letter. Now, you want to make sure you talk to faculty or supervisors, and be sure to follow the guidance of the graduate schools that you're applying to. They typically will say, we want letters from faculty or supervisors. If they want a letter, a personal reference, they'll state it. But letters from moms and dads and cousins and nannies are typically not appropriate. You want folks who could answer letters, who could write letters, who know your academic aptitude, who know what you would be like as a student. I know that that sounds a bit weird, that I would say they don't want letters from uncles and aunts and moms and dads. And I'm saying that because, having reviewed applications, I've gotten letters from those individuals. And I get concerned when I see those kinds of letters. Remember, if they want a letter from a person, from a family member or a personal reference, they'll state it. But if they're asking for letters of recommendation, they typically want it from supervisors, ideally clinical supervisors or faculty members. So think about your letter writers. And in the fall is when you start to submit the application. If you have an opportunity to take a lighter load, so like 12 credits versus 15 credits, then think about doing those 12 credits in that fall, because applying to grad school is like a course. You are, dotting I's and crossing T's and finalizing your CV and finalizing your personal statement and talking to faculty and all that good stuff. So in the fall, you start to prepare and submit your application. You want to keep in mind that some programs have hard deadlines. We want your application by November 15th, or we want it by December 1st. And then some programs have rolling admissions. They'll just keep taking them until they've filled their class, or they'll just keep reviewing until they have a particular soft deadline in their mind. So that's what rolling admissions means. And then in the spring, you are typically interviewing by these programs. I suspect that maybe we might still be doing virtual interviews depending on where things are with the pandemic. So if you are invited to do a virtual interview, be sure to practice, be sure to make sure that your technology is working, make sure you've got a great background, pick a virtual background if possible, if you don't have the right kind of background for your virtual meeting. Be sure to have privacy, right? You don't want folks walking in the background. You don't want folks making noise. If you have to if the campus is open and you want to find a quieter space on campus, go ahead and do that. The upside is that you're saving money. If you're applying to grad school outside of New Jersey, you'd be flying, staying at hotels, and so you are saving some money. Hopefully, if all goes well, you get accepted in the spring and you start in the fall. Doctoral programs usually start in the fall, and some students wonder if they can, start in the spring. That's not a typical start time for doctoral programs, so they typically start in the fall. Some master level programs do start students both in the spring and the fall, and so that'll vary from program to program. So that personal statement that I talked about, this is just some general guidance. Be sure to read the directions and answer the questions that the program is asking you to answer. I've looked at over 100 personal statement requests as part of a research project, and we narrowed it down to what we called the 7 whats of a personal statement. So what happened that you became interested in psychology? What did you do about it? What's unique about you? What do you want to do with a graduate degree? What about the particular program interests you? what's the difference? So if you're applying to a PhD program, why a PhD program? If you're applying to a PsyD program, why a PsyD program? Obviously, if you say, if you're applying to a PhD program and they're very research oriented, and you say, I'm applying to your program because I want to be in private practice, they're just going to put your application away. Now, if you apply to a PsyD program and you say, I'm applying to your program because I want to be a researcher, they're probably going to put your program, dismiss your application. So you need to communicate in the personal statement, why are you applying to a PhD over a PsyD? If you're doing school over clinical or clinical over counseling, why? Why clinical over counseling? Why counseling over school? You need to know the differences and communicate the differences to these programs. And then what else? What else might you want to highlight? If you did not do well in that clinical psychology course, be sure to explain why that was. And the last thing you want to do is you don't want to blame the faculty member. So it won't work in your favor if in that personal statement you badmouth a faculty member. You want to try to explain any poor grades, or any low GRE scores or anything else that you think needs to be explained. In terms of what's unique about you, if there's something unique in your background that you want to highlight, for example, if you speak a second language, or there's a particular population you want to work with, be sure to highlight in the personal statement. Now, I know it's called a personal statement, but you don't want to get too personal. Keep it kind of professional while you're writing your personal statement. So if you've had if you've struggled with mental illness, this might not be the place to highlight it in your personal statement. Or if a family member has struggled with mental illness, may not be the best place to highlight hardship. You also don't want to try to be funny in your personal statement. Again, you want to be professional, but you want to put your best foot forward and really highlight all the great things that you've been up to. Usually something happened that you became interested in psychology. You might have taken 101 and you were wowed by it. You might have had a chance to work with somebody in a research lab, and that led to you understanding why you pursued a major in psychology. Once you declared that major in psychology, what'd you do about it? Right? You took the right coursework. You did you gained some experience in a research lab. You did a co-op. Right? Those are the things that you want to highlight in bullet 2. What did you do about it? What do you plan on doing with a graduate degree? So what do you want to do with this degree? Be sure to highlight that. If you're pursuing a particular program, why? Why are you pursuing? Do you like their mission? Highlight their mission. Do you like the faculty? Highlight the faculty. For these programs, it's important that you be a good fit. Programs don't want to invest time in interviewing you and bringing you in to then realize that you are not a good fit, and then you leave them in year 2 or year 3. That hurts you and that hurts them. So it's really important that you try to explain to them, why are you pursuing them? And that way they can figure out whether you're a good fit or not. Here are some quick resources that I want you to check out. So this comes out of the American Psych Association. It's a great web page with lots of resources on applying to grad school. This is a free video series to guide students through the research, application, interviews, and decision making. It's preparing and applying for graduate school in psychology. This is a colleague that I know that I know through the APA. I spoke to I teach a PhD class, and I asked my PhD students today if they had any advice, and one of the PhD students said, definitely show them this link. It's titled Mitch's Uncensored Advice for Applying to Graduate School in Clinical Psychology. He does a great job talking about differences between clinical, counseling, social work, so on and so forth. And then he takes you through the whole process. So be sure to check out that webpage. This is another great resource, Getting into Graduate School, Your Roadmap for Success. Check them out. One tip for choosing the right graduate program, and I'll get to the heart of the matter. What program will give me the best chance of getting the job I want when I graduate? So think about what it is you want to do, right? Start there. Think about your dream job. what do you imagine yourself doing with these individuals? What are your values and what's important? So if diversity is important to you and social justice is important to you and understanding people from like cradle to grave, having that full developmental perspective, those are values that are really well aligned with counseling psychology. So counseling psychology might be the right fit for you. So understand your values, understand your goals, and that'll get you to that'll help you narrow down which program is ideal for you. PsyD or PhD? This is a great way to kind of figure out, should you do a PsyD or a PhD? Now, crudely speaking, if you just want to practice and you want to use the science of psychology to inform your practice, then a PsyD might be the best route. If you want to do research, you want to do the research that informs that practice, then that a PhD might be the better route. If you want to teach and do research, then a PhD might be more appropriate. Now I'm a little different, right? I have a PsyD from Rutgers, and here I am, 20 years at Montclair State, doing research, licensed to practice. So I'm a little bit different, but if you're clear about your path, then then get to the PsyD programs or get to the PhD programs. And this link will help you understand the difference. And then once you know the difference, do you want to be a clinical psychologist or a counseling psychologist? And remember, you could also be a school psychologist, a doctoral level school psychologist, and possibly be eligible to practice. The master level psychologists, at least in New Jersey, those folks are called certified school psychologists, and they can operate in schools, but they're not licensed to practice independently. But if you want to pursue training in school psychology, you want to do work with that population and be school-based and also have the option to work independently, then you could do either a PhD or a PsyD in school psychology. But if you want to know the difference between clinical psychology or counseling psychology or school psychology, go to the APA website and go to the relevant divisions. There's a division on clinical, there's a division on counseling, and there's a division on school. Check out the divisions and check out what the differences are. Other good resources, this book comes out every year. It's called The Insider's Guide to Graduate Programs in Clinical and Counseling Psychology. The first 5 chapters of the book are devoted to applying to grad school. Great resource. They also have a great roadmap, like what you should do from year 1 to year 4 at the undergraduate level. So if you're a first year or second year student, this might be a great roadmap for you. If you're a third year or fourth year student, this might be a great self-assessment. What have I done? What do I still need to do? And then this is a great article. It's got a funny title, Kisses of Death in the Graduate School Application Process. It was published in 2006, but it's still very relevant. Things you don't want to do when you apply to grad school. All right, so in the chat box, I'm going to go look at the chat box, but I'm going to just ask you to, in the chat box, what's one key takeaway from today's session? Like, what's one thing you're taking away that you feel like is critical? And then what's one thing you will do right away toward reaching your goal to apply to grad school? And while you're doing that, I'm going to look at the chat box to see what's in there. While you're thinking, I've got a question here. How do I make sure I keep relations with past professors for recognition if I am no longer in their class? Great question. So you want to make sure that you reach out to them and first of all, say, I really enjoyed your class. I really learned a lot. You clarified my career goals. And I'm wondering, I did really well in your class. Hold on to the assignments because you could always send them the assignments later on. And you could say, what's the best way to keep in touch, especially with adjunct faculty, because sometimes they're around one semester and some semesters they're not. So ask them if there's a better email for them. The full-time faculty, unless we retire, we will be around to help you. But do ask faculty I keep really good notes. So if I've had you in class, I can go right to my Excel spreadsheet. I can see how you did on quizzes. I can see how you did on the paper. I can see if you were on time all the time. I can see if there were lots of absences. So I look at all that data as I'm writing my letter recommendation for you. Um, what is the interview process like? Asked another student. Um, so again, those resources that I shared with you, there's great ideas there for what the interview process is like. But a lot of the questions that I'm asking you, that I highlighted in the personal statement, they're probably going to ask you, right? So what is it about our program that interests you? You know, you've told me all about you in the application. What don't we know about you? Some programs meet with you individually and they just want to see how you come across. You know, do you communicate well? You've got it. You create a nice rapport and you make a nice connection. Some programs have group interviews because they want to see what you would be like in the classroom with other students. So you want to keep in mind that when you're doing a group interview, you're not necessarily competing with those folks because they might be accepted too. What's really important is how you come across in that group with those students. So being collaborative, building on other people's ideas, maybe even saying to another student, I mean, I'm not asking you to be disingenuous, but genuinely saying, I really liked what you said and I just want to build on it, is a nice way of showing what you would look like in the classroom. So you want to keep an eye on your competitive edge, how you come across. So some interviews are individual interviews. Sometimes you meet with students. Sometimes you meet just with faculty. Sometimes you meet with faculty and students. Sometimes you meet with in a group. But they typically spend the whole day with you. They show you around. They have lunch with you and other students. But again, some of this stuff might be virtual, so keep that in mind. I'm seeing more students here. I heard they aren't running GREs this year, which sounds nice, but I'm wondering if this means it's going to be even more competitive than it already is. If you have any information about that, so please be sure to check out that Twitter feed on this topic, because you are raising a good point. Some students have already taken the GREs, so will faculty already have a bias or a preference for those students? So you want to make sure that you highlight all the great things that you've done, and be sure to communicate how you are a good fit. Be sure to communicate that you understand what they are training you to be and that you are interested in being trained in those areas, right? So that fit is really important. I'm just going to keep going here. Somebody put in a great resource, volunteermatch.org. Be sure to check that out. A lot of stuff is happening online right now because of COVID. So be sure to connect with these virtual volunteer experiences. Somebody's asking about a gap year to kind of catch up. Everybody's got their own personal circumstances. Some students, I'm going to just take a detour real quick. Some students opt for the master's degrees that lead to licensure because they can't afford to be in school for 5 years. So they want a degree that they can do in 2 or 3 years and be able to get licensed and start working right away and making money. And some students really would like to get that doctorate and be a doctor and get additional training and become a master clinician. And so, everybody's circumstances are different. The gap year, I don't know how to respond to that. It depends on who you are, what your profile says about you. Sometimes I worry with some students, if you take the year off and you get a job, will you come back to pursuing your dreams? But if you get a job and that job pays for grad school, and you can go to grad school part-time. That's what I did. I had a job and my job paid for grad school. So I got my master's part-time. 3 years later, I had a job, I was making money, and I had my master's, and it was paid for. So that's something you want to keep in mind. Somebody mentioned forensic psych. So if you're interested in forensic psych, you definitely want to take psych and law. You definitely want to take forensic psychology. Reach out to the forensic psychology faculty. Pick a forensic psychology faculty advisor. Do a co-op in a forensic setting, and perhaps do research. in in a research lab that has a forensic focus. So I'm seeing some great comments here of some takeaways, and folks have found the the presentation helpful. I have here, do you recommend going to certain faculty for recommendation letters? So think about the faculty who know you really well. If you've taken 2 or 3 classes with a faculty member, they know you well. If you're in their research lab, they know you well. Um, you know, I I will say if you've taken one class with me, I will say, I can write a letter. It won't be a strong letter, but it'll be a letter nonetheless. And if you did really well in my classes, I'll talk about the assignments that you took that you did in my class and how you did. And so I typically don't turn a student away unless you did poorly. You didn't make a great impression. And if my letter won't help you, I'll be honest and say, I don't think we had a really good connection, and I don't think I could write a very strong letter. Um, so if a faculty member says no, it's typically because they want to do what is what's in your best interest. So, but like for example, if you're just my advisee, I can't write a strong letter for you. I can't. All I can do is look at your transcript and see what they're going to see when you submit your transcript. So don't ask your faculty advisor unless you've had a class with them. Now, if you've had a class with them and they're your faculty advisor, then there's a second connection, and perhaps they can write more things. Somebody's saying that they have no connections with people at MSU. So if you're working full time, then your supervisors should be able to write letters. Think about volunteering, maybe on days off, and then develop a relationship with somebody. I'm not sure how you could, if you have your degree at Montclair State, you had to have had classes with faculty. So think about faculty you did really well with, and that you got along with, and they remember you. You could reach out to them. All right, folks, we are at 4:30, and I want to be respectful of your time. You get lots of emails from me because I'm the coordinator of undergraduate advising, so I'm always trying to share opportunities with you. Please check out those opportunities, and if they're not relevant, then go ahead and chuck them, but hold on to them if they're relevant. One person's garbage is another person's treasure, so be sure to check out my stuff. And then please come by during office hours. I'm happy to answer any specific questions you might have or talk to your faculty advisor. Melanie, I'll turn it over back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Fuentes. That was extremely insightful. We really appreciate you making that presentation today. I don't think I have any announcements other than our event coming up next week. If you guys are available, we will be having a Black Lives Matter fundraiser. Same link, same time. So if you are free, please come join us. And we will be having a DJ. So we'll have some good music, some karaoke opportunities. For those who are enthusiastic about that, please join us. And yeah, we'll just be having some discussion. We're all really excited for this event. Other than that, I will see you all next week, hopefully. Have a great week. Stay safe. And it was great seeing you all today. Bye, everyone.
Hi, guys.
Bye.